Hi, Shellye. I am so excited to have the chance to talk to you today. You're such an inspiration for anybody looking to become a leader in business. I know you don't need any introduction, but I will just introduce you briefly for the record. You are the former CEO of Metric Stream, which you built into a global leader with over 1,200 employees, and you are now sitting on multiple public company boards, including Verizon and Nordstrom. And I know you sit on multiple nonprofit national boards as well. So thank you again for being here. And I think what I love so much about your story is that you make all of that sound so easy and achievable. Through just some hard work and planning. And I'm guessing that's part of your magic, is that you make challenging things seem really easy. But I really enjoyed listening to your book because it did feel like, oh, any of us could do this. We just need to work hard and plan. So thank you. I thought I'd start today by just thanking you for the title of your book, which is Unapologetically Ambitious, which I just love because I think a lot of us are made to feel like we do need to apologize for our ambition. I think there are sort of cultural forces that are making us feel like in order to achieve our goals from a career standpoint, we need to make sacrifices. And you spend a lot of time in your book talking about sort of reframing our path, not as requiring sacrifices, but as requiring decisions and choices. And I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit and whether that's something that you sort of always innately knew, or how you arrived at that distinction and the extent to which that has really informed your mindset over the years.
So let me first start by just giving you my definition of sacrifice, because I do see a real distinction. So a sacrifice to me is something that you do completely for someone else. You know, you sacrifice whatever it might be for someone else. Well, when you do that, one of the things that happens is you put enormous pressure on the person that you're making all these sacrifices for, because they can never be grateful enough. They can never be thankful enough. They can never be appreciative enough because you've done all this for them, right? And then the other thing that happens is suddenly you've given your power away, because your actions and your steps are now actually being controlled by that person that you are sacrificing for and not yourself. So I believe it's important to reframe it, because everything you do is a decision. It is a choice. And it's important that we actually own that choice. Now, we need to consider all the stakeholders that are important around us for sure. But at the end of the day, we make the choice and we decide what we're doing. When we do that, we keep the power. You know, let me just give you a quick example. I ended up commuting from Dallas to Silicon Valley for 3 years, as you know. And people could have said, oh, Shellye, my goodness, all this commuting, why are you doing that? And I could have said, oh, I want to make sure that my daughter does not have to change schools in the middle of high school. So I am doing this for her. All right. Now, people would have been like, oh, what a great mom doing it for her daughter, right? But what kind of pressure does that put on Keflin, my daughter, who now, gosh, the reason mom's doing this is for me, which means it's my fault that she's on a plane every week, right? It's my fault that she's living in a crappy hotel room. It's my fault that, all the guilt, right? And the pressure of I better have to be perfect because if I'm not, if she's doing all this for me, that's totally unfair. She's 16. What are we talking about here, right? No. It's much more important. I own the choice. I'm doing this because I want to further my career and I want to allow my daughter to continue and finish in high school, right? And so I can share all that. But no, I own it. So by owning it, you keep that, and then you don't create all these artificial and frankly unhelpful, stressful situations between people.
I love that. I love in your book when you talk about your daughter giving you a journal where you could exchange notes to each other, sort of that you would keep it 1 week and write to her, and then she would keep it for a week and write to you. And I have to say, as the mom of an 11-year-old girl, that made me cry just thinking about that, as you said, instead of framing it as a sacrifice that either one of you were making, it was a decision and you were sort of in it together. And you read one of the notes that you'd written to her and you really talked to her about what you were doing at your job, and that I think is so powerful. So yeah, I love that story.
Thanks.
I think a lot about this idea that I want to lean in, but it's not going to help me to lean in if I've got all these forces sort of pulling me back. And so I think it's really important to surround yourself with people that are sort of in it with you, that really believe in your goals and believe in you. Do you, and I know how important your support network, your husband Scotty, and your family was to you. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of sort of surrounding yourself with people that believe in your goals, and then how you navigated those that didn't?
So first, let me preface this by saying something that people don't tell you. And that is, life is hard. Life is hard. You know, people don't tell you life is hard. Life is hard. It is hard for everyone. And nobody accomplishes anything of significance all by themselves. Nobody. And if they tell you they did, they're lying. They didn't. So do we need help? Yes, we need help. This is hard. Okay. So yes, I believe it's critical to surround yourself with people who are helping to build you up, because so much of the world wants to tear us down. We live in such a judgmental world that we are never quite good enough in any of these categories, right? If we allow ourselves to be judged that way. No, we need people around us who are reminding us that of course you're capable. Of course you can do this. Yes, you've got it, right? And yes, I'm right here for you and I've got your back. We all need that. And I know I absolutely did, which is why I talk about it. And I talk about those people as cheerleaders, because frankly, they're like cheerleaders, you know, sports team. They're on the sidelines going, go team, you got this, you got the power, right? Well, we need people saying, yes, Nicky, you've got this. Go for it, girl. Come on, you know, rah, rah. I mean, when I say cheerleaders, I mean people who are literally going to build you up, because life is hard. Right?
I love this story in your book. You talking about being in Japan for IBM, and someone, I can't remember who, but someone important from within the company was coming to visit, and you weren't asked for to meet with the person, and that your husband was more upset than you were, which really resonated with me, because that is my husband, who often sort of gets more fired up than I do. And that is so valuable. That sort of wind at your back, you know, really helps push you forward.
Absolutely.
So for those who are sort of still climbing their ladder and still on their leadership journey, you, I think, really make a good point in your book that it's sort of not enough to just have ambition. You have to be really thoughtful about sort of the importance of goal setting, planning, and making decisions really almost daily that sort of are in furtherance of those goals. So can you talk a little bit about sort of, for people that are still sort of navigating their journey to where they want to be, what you did in that regard, and then if there were things that you might in retrospect have done different?
Yeah, you know, the biggest thing was realizing that the odds aren't in my favor. They just weren't in my favor. I mean, I'm a little Black girl growing up in the 60s and the 70s. There weren't people who looked like me around, right, et cetera. So it was really clear to me young that the odds aren't in my favor. But that doesn't mean I can't do things. I just have to figure out how to improve the odds. And planning, setting goals, that really became how I worked to improve the odds, because most people didn't do it. And I knew that if I just did what everybody else did, odds were I wasn't going to get what I wanted. So I had to do something different. So yes, the most powerful set of tools that I used was figuring out, what is it I want? And then I'd ask myself, well, what has to be true to get it? And in asking myself what had to be true, then I have to do the research. Well, what has to be true? I want to be a CEO. What has to be true? Do the research. Who were the CEOs? What were their backgrounds? What was their education? What was their career path? What were their lifestyles like, right? What, all those questions. And then once I understand that, the last question is, how do I make it true? And that becomes the plan. And then here's where the power comes from, because a lot of people set goals. Some people put plans in place, but I find that most people actually don't make decisions every day consistent with their plans. And that's really where the power comes from. I assumed that my plan was going to happen. Now, did it always? No, things happen, right? But I made the assumption that it did. And by making the assumption that it was going to happen, I started planning for it like it was. And so therefore, I ended up improving my ability to be lucky, right? To get opportunities, to be prepared when things came along. You know, I'll give you an example. I'm starting out my career at IBM. And I knew early I wanted to be a CEO, right? So, all right, fresh out of IBM, then I'm watching, I'm looking at the people, and I'm watching executives. And you know what? They're all good on their feet. They can all speak and talk and present, and they're charismatic and they're comfortable and easy. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm terrible on my feet. I'm not comfortable. I get nervous. And I'm like, gosh, if I can't even do this, I can't even make an executive level, forget the CEO level, right? So what did I do? I worked on it. I said, all right, how do I fix it? I need practice. So I joined Toastmasters. I worked on it. I strengthened my ability, all those kinds of things. So then when I was ready to actually be asked to speak and to talk and do all these things, I was good at it. The key is preparing yourself for what you want to do in the future, but we're starting now.
Don't push it off. Yeah. Are there things that you did that you would do differently in retrospect?
Oh, yes. When I started out my career, I was looking around at all leadership. I mean, men, right? Men everywhere. So I thought I had to act like a man, down to wearing the suits and the little bow ties, cotton shirt. This is IBM, right? So looked the part, acted the part. I didn't need to do that. That was exhausting. And, fortunately, in a couple of years, I realized this is just ridiculous. But I wish I'd figured that out earlier because it literally was exhausting.
I love that. I every time someone sort of suggests I need to do something that, sort of what would a man do, I get so frustrated because I think we really need to shift the culture, not shift ourselves, right? Oh, so you have a chapter in your book entitled Embrace Your Limits, and you talk about a time after your son was born, your second child, where you realized that you were burnt out and you needed some help in order to sort of get you through that. So how do we recognize burnout in ourselves, and then what do we do about it once we're there?
Well, I'll tell you what it was for me, and I think it happens to a lot of people this way, and that was I was just exhausted. I felt like I was tired all the time. Even when I slept okay, I was still tired. I didn't really want to get out of bed, right? The energy level was low. And like, this isn't me. This isn't me. So all of these signs, and I wasn't that happy, which also wasn't me. So all of these things were going on. And it was like, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what's causing this. And so fortunately, I actually reached out for help. Because remember the point I made earlier, life is hard, get help. All right, all kinds of help. So it was through sessions with a psychologist that I learned that, I was giving 100% of myself away. I had 2 kids at the time, a husband at the time, and a job. I'd already been promoted a couple times. I got my first nonprofit board. I had my neighborhood. I was involved in the community with the kids. I mean, I was giving all of it away and not doing anything to recharge myself. So fortunately, it happened late 20s, and I learned from that experience. So I actually never experienced burnout again because I knew the signs and I learned what I needed to do for me. For each of us, it's something different to refill the tank. But I learned for me, I have 3 things. I need to eat 3 meals a day. Now you probably say, well, Shellye, that's ridiculous. We all eat 3 meals a day. No, you don't. No, you don't. I mean 3 real meals. I don't mean a granola bar and a bag of peanuts. I don't mean grabbing something, yogurt. No, I mean meal. Even as a CEO, if I didn't have an outside meeting, I brought my lunch. Not because I couldn't afford to buy lunch, but because if I didn't, things would get busy. And next thing you know, you're grabbing nuts or grabbing something, right? 3 meals a day. I need to exercise regularly, and I need to interact with people at least twice a week. I'm a people person. So if I have those 3 things going, I'm usually okay.
Love that. So I think all can sort of see burnout in ourselves, maybe, or maybe not, but it is one thing, I guess, to address it within our own selves. But as leaders, how do we manage teams and keep our teams productive and sort of meeting business demands while also making sure we're not pushing people to the point of burnout? How do we balance those sort of competing demands? This feels really top of mind for me right now, especially in the midst of COVID. I'm constantly sort of trying to navigate this within my own team.
Yes, it's a great question. And, it really starts as a manager, it starts with a really very simple point. And that is, you need to care about your employees and they need to feel that you care about them genuinely. Because all of us as human beings, we want people to care about us. We want it at home. We want our spouses or our families or kids. We want them to know that they care about us. Well, that doesn't change when we get to the office. We want people around us to actually care about us too. And so first is to care. And caring is saying, how are you? And actually meaning it. Not how are you? How's it going? I mean, that's not you're not really asking the question, right? But it is a really, how are you? That in itself, just knowing that people actually care about how you are doing is actually a reliever of stress. All right. Now it doesn't fix the problem, but that in itself is actually a reliever because now I have connection, real connection. The second thing that's very practical is it's all about prioritization and communicating priorities effectively. If people understand what's really important and you give them, therefore, the ability to make the trade-offs they need to make, but they understand what's really important, it also helps. And then the third thing is to let people know that if they need the valve released, right, to say something. And it's not a negative, and it's not going to ruin their career, and it's not going to make them seem like they're not ambitious, right? And it's not, we have to let them know that it's actually okay, because most people assume that it is not, that they look weak. So those are three things that I think are important for managers.
That's fantastic. Those are, very sort of practical and easy to implement. So I guess in particular, I think the pandemic has been really hard on women. I just sort of anecdotally have a lot of friends that are professional women who are kind of full-time stay-at-home moms right now, and yet also full-time, radiologists and attorneys and executives leading companies. Some of us are homeschooling in the midst of all of this as well. And I think a lot of women are talking about leaving the workforce. A lot of people are waving the white flag, or they've already kind of thrown in the towel. What do companies need to do right now in particular to make sure that they hang on to women through this time?
Yeah, millions of women have already left, right? And one of my biggest questions for corporate America is, well, why did you let them leave? Right? Every company has the ability to do leaves of absence. I used to use that as a CEO. People would come and say, whatever it is, something they're facing, something they're doing, they just have to go. And I'm like, fine, but don't quit. Take a leave of absence, right? Let's figure out how we do this. Or is a way to craft something, right? That's fewer hours, that's less demand, whatever. So they stay tied. Obviously, you hired them for a reason. They were making a contribution. They were adding value. So you want them to continue to do that. So number one, don't just automatically let people leave. Make sure you understand why. And is there something that you can do as a company, right, to still keep that connection? Second, you know who they all are. So we ought to still be communicating to these women and creating paths in terms of to come back. The other thing, it goes back to the caring point, is giving them a place to be able to talk about this, discuss, to share, even amongst each other. What are best practices? What are you doing? Oh my God, how are the people handling this? Because remember, life is hard, but it is for everyone. So let's share in that. I'm a big believer in reaching out to others to learn from them, right? None of us is smart enough all by ourselves.
And just being able to talk about it and knowing that you're not the only person who is finding it incredibly difficult is so cathartic. I totally agree. Just talking about it always helps. I often look back, so I'm an attorney, I'm a partner and a office managing partner, et cetera. I think for me, the hardest point of my career was being a mid-level associate at a law firm. You're managing up, you're managing down. It sort of coincides with a time in your life when you have little kids. You probably have demands of, aging parents. It's such a difficult point in your career. And so much of the advice out there focuses on how to lead or how to follow, but not how to be in the middle. It's like being the middle child, which I am also. How do you, what do you say to sort of people that are managing from the middle, besides, eventually you'll get through this?
First of all, remember that point about priority? Well, it's important to do for yourself. So one of the things that I think is just so critically important is consciously decide what you're willing to be judged on. Consciously decide what you're willing to be judged on, because the world will judge you on everything. And therefore, if we're trying to do everything up to expectations of the world, we feel totally overwhelmed. I mean, that's ridiculous. We can't do it. So decide what you're willing to be judged on. And then back to priorities and focus on those things, because it is hard. I talk about this in the book too, but as an example, my daughter was born with really thick curly hair. All right. And to tame her hair, you had to braid it. Now, I grew up braiding my hair. My hair used to be long, right? Braiding my sister's hair. So braiding is no problem. My husband, 6'2", former athlete, big hands. Have he ever braided little girls' hair? No. But did he need to learn? Yes. Because back to being, I couldn't do it all, right? So no, we all have to do this. So that meant for the couple months that he was practicing and learning how to do her hair, my daughter went to preschool with her hair pretty jacked up, parts kind of crooked, braids, thick braid, thin braid, all askew. I mean, she looked kind of really funky. I know for a fact when she got to school, people would look at her and say, well, where is her mother? How could they let her out of the house looking like that? She's 4. Yep. Does she care? No, she doesn't care. Did I care? No. That was not something I was willing to be judged on. What was important to me was my husband had to learn how to do her hair. And let me tell you, in a couple months, he got pretty good at it. And she was all great. We still have a picture on the wall to this day, Nikki. It was picture day, and my husband did her hair. Well, it was still in the early days. He was trying to do 2 braids, pin them up like a crown, right? Real cute. She left home looking like that, supposedly. Well, when picture time came, it wasn't quite pinned very well. So one braid had fallen down. It's starting to unravel. The other one's still across her head. And there she is.
Oh, and that picture means more to you than any other kid picture you have, I bet.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's still on the wall. It is still on the wall to this day. All right. Yeah. So the key is, that's just one example, but I've done that throughout my whole life. You decide what you're willing to be judged on, and let the rest go. All right. Get help. Get other people to do stuff.
That's incredibly invaluable advice. You talked in the book about how if your husband's shirt wasn't ironed, that you were the one that would be judged, not him. And that I was like, yes, absolutely. That's so true. And what does it matter what anyone else thinks? It's what's going on in my head that matters, right? So right. I'm going to take that advice and decide what I'm willing to be judged on and what I can dispense of. Let's talk a little bit, just sort of switching gears, this sort of fallacy of work-life balance. So you talk a lot about hating the expression work-life balance, which I love because I hate that expression too, in part because work is not my whole life, but work is part of my life. It's a big part of my life. It's probably the part that I spend the most time on. And so I really don't like this weird sort of binary work-life idea. And I kind of think of a personal life and a professional life as sort of braided together. And for me, many of the people that I care most about in the world are the people that I work with. I don't know, when you work hard, as we all do, and create relationships at work, it's sort of artificial to draw this distinction between career and personal, even in that way. So how do you sort of think about these things? And do you think that the way you think about them has sort of adjusted your mindset or informed your mindset in a way that maybe does help you not to get burnt out because you are looking at your life holistically as opposed to trying to create this perfect balance?
Oh, for sure. Because honestly, the reason I can't stand the term is because a balance is what? It's a fixed static structure with equilibrium on both sides at all times. Whose life is static? Whose life? Not mine, right? So to be suddenly judged on, are you holding everything in balance? Come on. We talked about that earlier. I have plenty of things to be judged on. I refuse to be judged on that. No. Work-life integration. You talk about a braid. I talk about integration. Same concept. I wear lots of hats. We all do, but they're all on the same head. Personal priorities, professional priorities, put those things together and then prioritize ruthlessly, so that you get done what needs to get done, back to the priorities, right? But that means some things aren't going to get done. And you either have to be willing to live with it or find somebody else to do it. That's how I've managed. And when it comes to making those, am I doing work? Am I doing personal? No, I try to integrate those things too. I mean, walks and talks, I do walks and talks to this day. I would do walks and talks one-on-one. If you don't have a presentation to show me or something I have to go look at, great, let's take a walk and have our meeting. Why? I need to exercise. Right? I mean, that's real clear. If I'm going out for, my husband and I used to love to go to the performing arts and things like that, and we could do it, right? Concerts, plays. But we didn't go alone. We'd invite 30 friends. Why? Because I want to see this anyway. And if I invite people, I get to see them at the same time, because time's what's most precious, right? Formed a gourmet dinner club because I like to cook and eat out and entertain and friends. Well, one event. So integrating is how I've been able to get more things done. This whole thing about, all right, do it over here, do it over here. I don't know how to do that. So I'm a big believer in integrating life.
And do you see that there are sort of benefits to organizations to fostering a culture that really pushes work-life integration? So I think it obviously is helpful for each of us sort of on a personal level, but do you think that there are sort of business reasons to foster that culture in your organization?
You know, I do. And I think we're actually seeing some of that in the pandemic. I mean, companies, and I say companies, a company is nothing more than the people within the company, right? So people are seeing for the first time whole people, because kids are coming in, dogs are barking, right? I mean, whatever's happening, you realize that they're working in a closet, right? Because that's the only place you have that's, I mean, we are actually seeing these full lives. And as a result of seeing these full lives, we actually become whole people. And when we become whole people, it actually makes who we are and the experience, the ability to communicate, interact, much more enriching. The other thing that happens is people tend to now give a benefit of the doubt, right? A bit more, because they now have a bit more empathy. And empathy is something that I'm so hoping grows significantly as a result of this overall pandemic, because I think it's a key leadership trait that we just didn't value enough. So all of that I see as positive in terms of the experiences that we've had.
Yeah, it feels like, I don't know, I've had this sort of observation over the years that some people that I worked with seemed like they had sort of the luxury of being able to present an image of themselves professionally that was completely unencumbered of like personal life, whereas I didn't. You know, I'm married. My husband works full time. He's a surgeon. We have 2 kids. I had to sort of put my cards on the table. And COVID feels like it sort of stripped all that away, because we've been in each other's houses for a year, even if by Zoom, but we've seen, we've heard everyone's kids scream, we've heard the dogs bark, and we've seen people, unshaven and in their what looks to be pajamas. And so I really feel like in a way it's kind of even the playing field, that we are all humans, and hopefully some of that will persist after.
Agreed. And you know what? We're getting it done.
That's right.
And that's the key. Right. That's the key. The key is, and we're getting it done. Yes. So that's the learning.
To that point, I feel like if 2020 taught us anything, it was that there is incredible power in being flexible and in being resilient. Mm-hmm. And you I assume wrote your book sort of pre-COVID.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So you were obviously very prescient in sort of identifying those as important skills in kind of your journey to leadership. Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of the power of resilience and flexibility?
Oh, certainly. Back to life. Life isn't this fixed, straightforward thing, right? It's ups and downs and curves and the whole bit. So the ability to actually adapt and to adjust and to be able to keep moving. I tell people you wouldn't get in your car and head to like the grocery store, right? And then come up on a road construction and then stop. Just stop. Just say, okay, I'll wait till the construction's over and then I'll keep going. Right? No, you wouldn't do that. You also wouldn't like turn around and go back home. Well, I guess I can't get there, right? Because the road's blocked. No. What would you do? You go get help. You look at GPS. Is there a different path, right? You take a different road. You might even just explore yourself before figuring it out to say, well, maybe this road will take me there. We need to be doing that in our careers.
Yeah. Right? Some people just drive right through the construction, right?
Exactly. That happens too, right? Might have a little damage along the way, but it happens. But the point is, keep going. All right. So we need to approach our careers with that same resiliency that we have in our own personal lives and things that we're doing. If the path doesn't look straightforward or it looks blocked or whatever, fine, figure out another way. And by the way, you don't have to do it by yourself, right? Go get help, ask people. All of those things. Half of the battle is staying in the game.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Okay, before we run out of time here, I want to talk about something super important and really, I think, important to a lot of business leaders at the moment, and that is the importance of allyship in our organizations and making sure that we are advancing people of color within our organizations. And I've heard you talk about this distinction between mentorship and sponsorship, and it's so important. And I wondered if you could speak to that.
Sure. I see mentorship as reactive. When you're a mentor, your mentee really owns that relationship. They're the ones that should set the agenda, right? Come for advice, report back, etc. So it's really this reactive. Whereas sponsorship, to me, is a proactive. A sponsor is someone who is talking about you when you're not in the room. Somebody who's opening doors. Someone who's laying groundwork, right? Smoothing the path so that you're able to indeed achieve the things that you want to achieve. So we need to make sure that a broad swath of people have not just mentors, but actually sponsors. And one of the things that I tell the companies that I'm engaged with is, listen, if you really want to drive change, then you are building leaders of the future. So every leader needs to know how to develop talent. So why don't you just require the next N1, N-1 to N-2 to N-3 down that they have to sponsor two people that don't look like them. They can pick who they are, but two people who don't look like them. By doing that and then actually holding them accountable for it, because they can pick whoever they want. Now, how are those people doing? Have they been promoted? Have they gotten new opportunities? Right? What's happened over the years? That's how we start to actually make change. And it's good for the leaders too, because they're going to learn a lot about experiences that those people who don't look like them are actually having. So I don't think this is that hard. We just have to be intentional. And I know if you read the book, you heard the word intentional throughout the entire book.
Yeah.
Being intentional is important as an individual, but it's also important as a company. We need to be intentional about what we're actually trying to manifest. Hope is not a strategy. We have to be intentional. Set targets, set objectives, set expectations.
I love that. So lastly, I think sometimes on this sort of idea of allyship and sponsorship, there is this disconnect between sort of what leaders think that they are achieving and what their teams actually feel. I've had this experience as a woman of sort of hearing more senior people talking about how well they're doing in sort of furthering women within their organization and not feeling that. So how do we bridge that gap with the people on our team that we're trying to sort of move up and bring along?
Yeah, I know this is going to sound really trite. Ask them. Just ask them. And you can do it informally through like pulse surveys, right? You can do it formally by actually just having a conversation, right? How is this going? Are you feeling a difference or an impact? But we need to actually start asking the people that we are trying to support and help, whether or not it's working and or what is working better than others. So we know where to double down and where to stop.
Love that. Thank you, Shellye. All right. Well, I think we're probably ready to wrap up here. I guess maybe just for one last question. In 2020, there was a lot of sort of press about this idea that women-led countries were doing better from a COVID standpoint. Do you think that what it means to be a good leader is changing? And do you think that what is sort of important now, you talked a little bit about the importance of empathy and how that sort of come to the forefront. Do you see sort of the way we measure good leaders as changing?
I sure hope so. As I look at it, I think that skills such as empathy, strong communications, the ability to inspire and connect, right, are super important, especially when you have far-flung organizations comprised of very different types of people. So people who can do that, right, and do that effectively, I think are going to be more successful. And the good news is that all ties to collaboration. And studies show women in general, right? Not all, but women in general actually tend to be better at collaboration, communication, and connection. So I think we're in a very good position to be able to capitalize on our ambitions and truly strive to those senior leadership levels. So I hope everybody will go for it.
Thank you.